How to tell if you have herpes? I've never had an outbreak, so I definitely don't have herpes. Unfortunately, the lack of a visible outbreak doesn't mean you're herpes-free. Many people infected with the virus never experience an outbreak, and when they do, it frequently isn't recognized. This explains why, according to the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, 87.4% of infected individuals have no clue. Outbreaks can be very mild and even confused with things like heat rash, jock itch, yeast infections, and allergic reaction. So while some cases do involve pronounced symptoms, most never do. Cold sores and genital sores are way different. Many people wrongfully believe that cold sores don't count as real herpes. This misconception stems from the general patterns of the two type. For most people, HSV-1 tends to affect their mouth, while HSV-2 usually manifests on the genitals. But either virus can affect either body region, all it takes to spread is skin-to-skin contact. Let's say you touch an infected person's genitals with your mouth while they're shedding the virus, but there's no genital-to-genital touching. You can then be infected with either HSV-1 or HSV-2, whichever your partner has, and go on to develop lesions at the site of the infection, in this case, your mouth. I got tested for STDs recently, so I know I'm in the clear. Even if you've been hyper-responsible about getting tested, that's irrelevant when it comes to herpes. The CDC doesn't recommend testing for the virus, so a herpes test is typically not included in the routine STI panel. This is because a blood test for herpes only tells you whether you've been exposed to the virus, and a positive result only raises a whole host of concerns of when, and how, and where, which are not answerable by that test. It's not going to change your management and provide more answers, which is why it's not routinely offered. Complicating things further is that the herpes virus which infects the mouth and genitals is very similar to the herpes virus that causes shingles and chicken pox. So how do you know if you have herpes? The best way to tell is to wait until you have a lesion or outbreak of lesions. Then your doctor can run tests on the lesions to determine whether they are in fact herpes, and what type you're dealing with. Without a visible outbreak, herpes isn't contagious. Since outbreaks aren't always obvious, it's not always clear when you're contagious. There are a few days a year when herpes is active and possibly transmitted without any symptoms present. This is known as viral shedding. This doesn't happen on most days, but it's tricky, because there's no real way to know. All this sounds really scary, but what it boils down to is the importance of practicing safe sex. While the risk of transmission will never be zero, there are some steps you and your partner can take to significantly reduce the risk of transmission: avoiding sex during an outbreak, using condoms. The partner with herpes can also go on suppressive therapy, antiviral medications like valacyclovir, brand name Valtrex. Condoms are your best friends for any kind of sex. People still look at me like I have two heads when I suggest condoms for oral sex. But if there's any question, then use them. People with herpes must be promiscuous. The reality of any STI is you don't need to sleep around to get infected. This is especially true for herpes, considering there's such a large population of asymptomatic carriers. While having more partners obviously increases your risk of any kind of sexually transmitted infection, the reverse doesn't always hold, she points out. In other words, all it takes is one partner. I can't have kids if I have herpes. Herpes doesn't affect your fertility in any way, and there are plenty of safe delivery options to ensure the virus isn't transferred to your baby. Still, genital herpes can increase the risk of miscarriage, preterm birth, or in rare cases, a potentially dangerous infection in newborns if the mother is experiencing symptoms at the time of birth. If my partner suddenly shows signs of herpes, they must have cheated. If you've been monogamous with your partner for 5, 10, even 20 years, then out of the blue they have a visible herpes outbreak, the only logical explanation is cheating? Right? Not necessarily. Similar to HIV or chicken pox, herpes has viral latency, or the ability to lie dormant in your body for years without showing any signs. You could have been infected in your 20s, and the virus might show up again when you're 40. The virus stays in your system even if it isn't active. In some cases, people won't have any kind of outbreak unless it's triggered by a significantly stressful life event, like another illness. We're all doomed to get herpes. Herpes may be super common, but that doesn't mean you'll definitely get it. Sure, it's unsettling that so much of the population has the virus, but just because someone has the disease doesn't mean they're going to transmit it. In fact, most outbreaks usually occur in the first or second year following infection, and after that, your body tends to suppresses the virus for the most part. How to tell if you have herpes? How to tell if you have herpes or a pimple? How to tell if you have herpes on your face? How to tell if you have herpes without an outbreak? How to tell if you have herpes type 1? How to tell if you have herpes in your throat? How to tell if you have herpes on tongue? How to tell if you have herpes on your tongue? How to tell if you have herpes or a canker sore? How to tell if you have herpes in your eye? Thank you for watching, and please subscribe to my channel for my upcoming herpes treatment videos.